Thanks again for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast. I have just an excellent guest today. They're all excellent because they're all track coaches, but this one, I don't know, just maybe another notch above. Help me welcome head coach of Summit High School in beautiful Bend, Oregon, David Turnbull. David, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. I did a little research on you. We've met, I think, once or twice through my career. You are good friends with my mentor, now former teammate, Fred Dixon, of course.
Absolutely.
And I won't hold that against you. That's an actual joke because everybody who knows Fred Dixon, one of the greatest guys in the whole world. So if he calls you friend, you must be good.
Yeah, he is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And since we started things up at Summit, I remember when he walked out there one day, I met him. And the first thought I had was, gosh, you've got a radio voice. He's got such a deep, amazing voice. And he looked at the project we had going and he said, you might be building one of the finest high school complexes in the country. And we just hit it off and have had an incredible working relationship over the years.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. And his voice is super unique, man. He's unique. I love that guy.
He's a great guy.
Well, that was cool. That's a great, you must be on radio and stuff because that was a great introduction to talking about Summit High School. So doing some snooping about you, you actually have been at Summit High School from the very beginning. It was a new school in 2001 and you were the coach right from the get-go.
Yeah, I had an opportunity. I coached over at a competing school, the school I graduated from, Mountain View High School. And I started coaching there officially when I graduated from Oregon State. And I was there for 5 years. And we had a slew of amazing athletes. I just saw one the other day, Jesse Thomas. I had to borrow basically a tool to help my son get around. It's a Walk 2.0 device, kind of cool. But Jesse was a Pac-12, maybe it was Pac-10 back in the day. He was a steeplechase champion and a phenomenal athlete. We had those kind of athletes at Mountain View. And we had won, district championship after district championship all 5 years I was there. It was a great run. But there was just something missing. And they opened a new school. And I took on the challenge of opening that new program and setting a few goals and just kind of jumped in and had never really had an experience building a program. But, coaching experience is one thing, but when you have to start from the ground up, build your facilities, design your facilities, fundraise to actually pay for the gear. I mean, they gave us $40,000 to start. And I remember thinking that's a lot of money until I looked at pole vault pits and I went, I'm not going to have any money left. So we just started there and went on and set some goals. And there's lots of stories with all of that, but we found some success and had some fun.
Did you start off as the head coach or were you?
Yeah, I started off as the boys head coach. It was a boys and girls program. We had two different coaches at that point. And I met with all the kids at Papa's Pizza, of all places. And as they were eighth graders, I sat them all down at pizza, and there was probably only 40 kids there. And I said, we're going to win a state championship in 4 years. And they agreed. They jumped in. I said, we'll win a district championship in 3 and state in 4. And I'd not really done my research on it, but I didn't realize it'd been 57 years since a team from Central Oregon had won state in track and field.
So now hold on. You did not win state when you were at Mountain View.
Nope. We didn't ever win state. And as an athlete, I never won a state championship, even though I held the state record in the high jump. I never won a state championship. I got second on misses. And 1 year, this kid named Mike Ehlers from West Lynn, he PR'd in every event. And I think the high jump, he PR'd 4 inches at the state meet and knocked me out. And so I'd always wanted to win a state championship. So I set a goal for myself. Said I wanted to be a better coach than I ever was an athlete. And that meant winning a championship. So the goal was to win one. And I think people thought we were crazy. In fact, an article in the Oregonian came out years later that the parents did think I was crazy to set those goals. But in 4 years, those seniors, we went to the state meet. We were supposed to get 5th or 6th, and every kid qualified for finals. And one of my greatest pictures on my wall at school is Nathan Crabtree coming across the finish line with his hands in the air. And 4 years later, that group won a state championship.
What was it? Was it the group? Was it just an aspirational, they have what they call BHAG groups, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals. Was it a BHAG? Was it the resources you knew you were getting at Summit? Although we already talked about, you had to fundraise everything. What was it for someone who had not won a championship to sit down with a bunch of 8th graders and will it to fruition?
I knew we had to change the way we're doing business. Over at Mountain View, we went to our standard track meets. We never went outside the state to compete, but other than indoors. And I knew that if we wanted to reach a new level, I had to expose these kids to levels of competition that we never had. And so I take kids down to Stanford. We had a group going down there. We took our boys relay down there, and they just got schooled. And I remember the first big track meet we'd gotten into, the Sandy Invitational. Our boys relay team actually tried to false start. They were so afraid. And I got wind of it, and I pulled them into the track shed down there, and I let them have it. And they got out there and they ran a lifetime PR, and then the 4x4 got in there, and we ended up placing 2nd or 3rd in that track meet. And from that time on, the expectations had been set, and we weren't afraid to talk the talk and walk the walk and put the time in. And I think it was a group effort. We just had this great group of incoming freshmen who didn't know any different. All they knew is, hey, we're going to win a state championship. And I think if you're going to start a new program, set some goals and build a culture, get that culture in place, and just drive towards those things. And if you get the right people, and I had some good coaches, I think anything can happen, including winning that state championship that had not been done for so long.
You mentioned a really key word there in the word culture. We've had some fantastic guests. One specifically about culture. We had the head coach of Ashland University, Judd Logan. He has an amazing culture. The throwing aspect gets the most attention because he's the head coach, he's the throws coach, but overall the team culture is amazing. Most people step into a program and there's already history into the program, whether there's been 20 years of a program and now they're the next head coach and they have to develop their own culture. You were starting a program from scratch. Looking back at it now, do you think it was easier or harder to create the culture you were working to instill since you had no history at Summit High?
I think that's a mixed answer. It was very difficult to start from the ground up because you had to do everything. You weren't just taking kids and working with kids. You're having to develop facilities. I look at Oregon State and what they're having to do to re-implement track and field. And, when Kelly stepped down, I was asked to apply for that position. And having developed Summit's program, I looked at what Oregon State was still doing, and they still had a bunch of facilities to continue to develop, and the fundraising and all that kind of stuff. I know how hard it is at Summit High School. So I decided not to apply for that job. If I ever decide to move up to the college ranks, I want to coach, and I want to coach. I don't want to have to be a fundraiser. I don't want to have to build facilities and all that. I've already done it once. It was hard and incredibly rewarding to look at what we've got now. But I think from that perspective, it was harder. But from the perspective of finding success with athletes, I do think it was easier. We didn't have anything. There was nothing written in the dirt. So we were able to I remember talking to that group of seniors and saying, what footprints are you going to leave in the sand? Because you're all going to graduate. And people are going to look at what you did, and there's going to be a legacy. So what is it? So they worked with me on all those things, and I get goosebumps telling me this story. When they graduated their senior year, they'd all made footprints, concrete footprints, and they brought those to the banquet, and they gave those to me. And those are still at Summit.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you do with that? Yeah.
they're still at Summit, but they're kind of set to the side because when they tore everything down, there's no place to put them.
Mm.
And so I've just kind of held on to them, and I hope someday that we can put those as part of a walkway or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the imagery. I love the motivation. And then to take all that and have a visual component for future
Right.
classes. I mean, that's the real deal right there. Holy cow. I love that the kid, first of all, you did have a special group because what 18-year-olds think that way?
You know, all of ours do. There's something special about the culture at Summit. You know, I went in this morning, I farmed for about 3 hours, and I went into practice. We have open practices in the summer. And, you know, today was a kind of a smaller group. There are 27 kids there, but they're all doing their drills.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You had a small group of summer voluntary track practice, track, not cross country. And the small group there were 27 kids. Some people don't have that for their whole team. That's amazing. That's culture right there.
That's culture. And a lot of those kids, they're heading off to college. So they're there every day. They're wanting to get their sprints in. They're wanting to get their lifts in. And with COVID, you know, we have to be very careful. The weight room has to be monitored. We're in masks and we're social distancing. We're doing all those things. But when you speak about culture, those seniors that didn't get their season, they're still waiting. We're trying to have 2 track meets. We're trying to do one, you know, here in the middle of this month and the 1st of August. And I had a girl today, she did a short approach 4-step and she went 35 feet. And it frustrated me because I'm sitting there going, gosh, we missed such an opportunity with her.
Well, it could have been.
Right, but she's signed with Oregon State, so she's going to get a chance to do that. But she's every day, I need to get faster, I need to get stronger, because we're all aware that if football doesn't have a season, there's going to be some pretty drastic cuts for track programs. And so she's looking at that going, I got to get my marks up now, because if they have to cut, I don't want to be one of the kids that gets cut. You know, so I don't know if I answered all the questions you had, but
oh, good. I love fear as a motivator sometimes. That's okay. I love that at least she's motivated. At the end of the day, there's a lot of people who are not motivated. You know, when bad things happen, we come to a crossroads and we can either quit or double down. And I love that her attitude is, all right, well, you know what? If something bad is going to happen, it ain't going to be because I didn't try. So she's
proactive.
Yeah, right? Exactly. I love
she's
that.
seeing this. And that's so important for high school kids. And, you know, we talked about that all season. We kind of knew that the shutdown was coming. You know, I had a meeting on Thursday, the 12th, and we had a team meeting. And I said, hey, guys, this could happen. This could happen. It was the most somber moment. And watching those kids respond the way they did, they really have this culture of family. And it was a sad day. And the next day at lunch, when I said, all right, guys, we're not going to be able to come back to school here. The likelihood of us losing our season is pretty high. And I said, if they give us an opportunity to practice, and we can tell you there will be no track meets, would you still come to practice? And 185 kids said, absolutely, we would be back at practice.
Wow.
And that's culturally, that's when you kind of know, okay, have you done something so valuable that there's value in it, irrespective of a performance mark?
Right.
And when they feel that when they step out on the track, that they are part of something special, they'll come back every day. And I guess that's the thing that's probably the underlying reason Summit has developed over time and has stayed fairly consistent on how successful they are, is there's been a groundwork laid by those seniors, that first group that moved through. And I always have to look back at that first group, because had they not did what they've done, we wouldn't have culture. We wouldn't have the culture of success where they step on the track and every year they just now expect to win state, or at least give it their very best. And we really thought the boys and girls this year both would win it, which is such a unique opportunity, because usually you get a strong group with one and not the other, and that's track and field.
Right.
And so we felt so strongly that we had the sprinters, the jumpers, we had everything pretty much covered on the girls' side and a few openings on the boys' side, but we had a strong sprint crew that could have challenged. They would have probably broken our school record of 3:21 in the 4x4, which for high school is pretty good.
Yeah.
Probably not state record. They didn't have that kind of potential, but we would have certainly had some fun trying it.
Well, tell us a little bit about Bend, Oregon. So you mentioned two high schools, Summit and Mountain View. Are those the two high schools, and what's the population like? How big is the school?
So Bend, Oregon now, population's around 100,000, so it's gotten pretty big.
Mhm.
There are 3 schools or high schools with competitive sports programs, a smaller school, Marshall, and now we are opening a 4th school. So it is being built right now and will be ready to go next fall. Not this coming fall, but it'll be ready next fall. And 4 schools in the size of Bend seems like a little bit much. And they're talking about us dropping back down to 5A level. And I don't want that. I like being at the 6A level. I want to be where Jesuit is. I want to be where Benson is. You know, the track and field superpowers are all at that 6A level. And yeah, we won't win as many state championships, but to me, we'll still set those goals. But a team really shouldn't win a state championship every year. We went through a run where we won 12 in a row. And that's not healthy. I hate to say it. That's not healthy for programs and kids. They get to this elitist thought process, and you know, I want to win state every single year, and we're going to push for that. But the reality is, if you're in the right division, that's probably not going to happen. You're going to have your Jesuits, your Bensons. This past year, so exciting to see South Eugene win it again, because that was the dominant track power when I was in school, and I want to have those schools that I'm competing with. I don't want to be at a lower division where you shouldn't score 140 points at the state meet. You know, you shouldn't do it. So,
And you mentioned 6A and 5A, and every state's a little different. Yep. So like, how big is Summit as far as student body? How many are in the senior graduating class on average?
So our senior graduating class this year was probably around 400.
Whoa,
and
okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty big, and we've grown substantially. There's a housing development right around Summit, but we have about 1,600 students at Summit.
Wow.
And previously we were about 1,300, so they kept us at the 5A level, more because transportation. Nobody wants to be in our conference, because Central Oregon is pretty widespread, and the Valley schools want to stay in the Valley. They don't want to come over the pass. So nobody really wants us in their conference. And so they kept us at 5A. And I think they will want us back at 5A, but I don't think I can hold out as the track coach. I think if football goes to 5A, track's going to 5A.
And with the two high schools, Summit and Mountain View, is your biggest regret that Ashton Eaton went to Mountain View and not Summit?
No, that's a great question. I get asked that a lot. I actually had a conversation with my wife about that. I coached Ashton when he was in 5th grade, and we had Central Oregon Track Club, and I had some studs down at the elementary school I was coaching, and they were good athletes. And I took them to a track meet at Mountain View, and Ashton was living in Lapine at the time. And we went over to the high jump. I had a kid, 5th grader, and I'm excited. This kid's jumping 5 feet. I mean, he's a pretty good athlete. So we go over there to the high jump, and he jumps 5 feet, and Ashton comes over with the worst form in the world, goes 5'7". And then we decide, okay, let's go over to the long jump. Ashton jumps 18 feet. And I'm looking at my kids, and I just said, listen, there's the difference between you're a great athlete, but this kid's got something special. And so I had a discussion with my wife when I was at Mountain View, because Ashton was coming in. And I said, I'm not sure if I want to go to Summit, because I had a girl triple jumper coming back. Her name was Katie Finnegan. And every coach has those athletes that you just connect with. And Katie and I had this connection. She was my girl. We already broke the school record in the triple jump. I was just starting to really get into the triple jump as a coach, and I wanted to coach her again, and Ashton was coming in. And I talked to my wife about it, and my wife said the smartest thing. She says, you're always going to have a kid you don't want to leave for. You need to make a decision based on what you want for yourself and your future and what you believe you can do. And it was the greatest advice. I said, you're right. I need to take this on. I need to develop my own program, our own culture, and just see what we can do.
That's awesome, man. I love that there's no regrets on that either. You know, when you make a decision, make it the most positive you can. And obviously, as going to Summit has been pretty positive.
Well, it's been very good. And, Ashton and I, we don't talk very often, but when we see each other, it's as if I coached him. I mean, we have such great respect for each other, as well as Mitch Bodine over at Mountain View, and he's done very well. And he comes back and he trains a lot of times over at Summit. And but that's track, and that's, you said it earlier. All track people are special, and what makes track people special? We're community based. Even though they went to different schools, they are our kids. And we were, this morning, I had a triple jumper from Bend High that was over jumping with us this morning, because our summer program is about building athletes, not building up your particular program. In essence, it does that. But you build athletes, and you build confidence within kids. And if they have some success in the summer, they take that into the school year with them, and it helps them in their classroom, and it helps them on the track. So I think that's what makes track coaches so special. We're community members, and we actually live that.
I love that you described that, Ashton. When you guys do see each other, it's as if you coached him.
Yeah.
And for someone that, I know Ashton through working with him here at Gill and some things, and you always tell people, as good of an athlete as he is, which there's no argument, he is 10x, 100x better person. I mean, he is just one of the greatest people in the whole world. I had a great time. I'm sure we have a friend in common, Harry Mara, where we did some interviews with him, and I had Ashton come on after the fact and give his side of the story. And I'll tell you what, that was it was just pure gold to hear Ashton and Bree's side of the time with Harry, which is just an amazing, special time in track and field. Speaking of special times, so you alluded to these state titles. I read an article. I wish I would have remembered the author to give him credit, but he was talking about coaches in the state of Oregon, high school coaches, and the amount of state titles that they've won. And I believe, if I remember the gist of the article correctly, you are number 3, correct me if I'm wrong, in total. So like, I think there was a golf coach that has won 20 something titles, and maybe there was a football or baseball coach, but you're one of the top 5 coaches of state championship teams in the state of Oregon, regardless of sports.
Yeah, I tend to remember that article. I think it came out 2 or 3 years ago. And it kind of surprised me a little bit, because you sit there and you work and you don't necessarily count all of the titles. You just kind of get going on it. And we were working on, trying to get as many in a row as we did, because once you start a streak, you want to keep it going. And honestly, I didn't want to stop for the senior group that had to lose it. I was like, nobody wants to be part of that. And then, last year when we went into the state meet, and unfortunately, we had some illnesses right in our district meet, and we had to run alternates on our relay, and our girls didn't get a 4x4 into the state meet. And we didn't set a goal last year of winning a state meet, because we graduated 34 seniors the year before, and 8 of them were Division I athletes. And so we went, okay, we can't replace that. And so our captain said, Turnbull, could you please not make a big deal about state championships this year? And I said, I get you. I don't want to put that pressure. So we didn't. Well, we go into the state meet, and Fiona Max wins the 3,000. So we're in first place from the first event all the way through the last event. Going into the 4x4, we're still in the lead, and we don't have a 4x4 because we didn't qualify one. And I look back at that, the times we were running during the season, had we had everybody healthy, they'd have won their 13th straight state championship. But we didn't have that. So in looking back at all of that, you kind of look at the numbers, and I think the boys have had 5 and the girls have had 12, so that's 17. It's a good number, with having the school from 2001 to now. They've done really well. But we've had such an impressive group of coaches that come back, and most people think incorrectly that Summit is successful because we're a wealthy school. Yeah, we're a wealthy school, but people don't realize that we fundraise between $20,000 and $30,000 a year. As you at Gill know, we have multiples of everything, and I'm not one that's going to wait for the hurdles to wear out. As soon as you see, all right, 1 or 2 broke a season, why is that? Oh, okay, because they're getting a little old. We don't have a place to store them, so they're out in the sun. So we replaced those things, and the program has now developed a habit of fundraising, not selling cookies. Everything we do is action based. The kids are out working. We're working basketball tournaments. We're doing refereeing. We're running score clocks. We're making pizzas. We're having pizza sales nights where we develop pizza and a movie night. So the kids sell that to families. They come in and buy pizzas, and all that money goes back into making sure our pole vault pits are excellent, to making sure that we have enough javelins. And I'm fortunate, our fundraising account's about down to zero right now, but I think we just spent all of the money we had. We had these big plans. The Summit Invitational was going to be monstrous this year. Beautiful backpacks put together, and our sponsors came through. Secure Storage took care of everything that we needed. And now, fortunately, I didn't put dates on those backpacks. It just says Summit Invitational, so I can.
That's the number one rule. Don't put dates on anything ever.
Don't put dates on anything. But
let's stay right there for a second.
Okay.
I always want to make sure that we're using the expertise of our guests to provide value for our listeners. So in the high school and even in the college ranks, let's be fair, fundraising is a big deal. You guys have created a culture of fundraising. I love that it's not based on the stereotypical ones of, selling popcorn and things like that. I live in a community where they do one fundraiser a year. They don't sell anything. It's literally, would you like to donate to the athletic department for the school? And that's it. There is no, okay, a month later, the baseball team is selling this and the track team is selling that. One and done. Everybody goes all full bore for it, and then we're done. I love that. But what can you, maybe for someone who's listening and they're struggling with fundraising, what has been your most successful type of fundraising? Not necessarily your easiest, right? I mean, sometimes the hardest work provides the biggest fruit. Can you think of maybe a suggestion to give a coach out there right now of what's a fundraiser they can do that might work for them?
I think every coach is going to be different. If you have the facilities, our greatest fundraiser, we built the Summit Invitational up to where it had 32 teams last year. And if you charge $300 entry for each team, you're going to make a substantial amount. But we went above that. We have business owners in our community that don't mind paying $50, right? So what I do is I said, all right, how many events in track meet? 17 times 2, right? You've got a bunch, and then we throw some steeplechase in there, some other specialty events. Well, you roughly have, 40 events that you're doing. Each event gets a sponsor. So I have a recording studio and DJ business. So I always get the high jump, right? So it's the Studio 7 high jump, $50, and I only get a girls high jump for that. If I want girls and boys, it's going to be $100. Well, just through your program alone, multiply that out, 40 times $50, all the entry fees, t-shirts. So the Summit Invitational makes us between $15,000 and $20,000 when all is said and done from the vendors.
I love that idea of taking something that you possibly, and if you don't, you should be doing, hosting a home meet if you have the facilities for it. Right. Even if you don't find a way, I mean, you don't got to have that's amazing. You have 30 plus teams. You could do a dual meet at your facility. I think it just brings so much school pride, even for the team to be competing at their home track. But I love that idea of using something you already have built in. You have a home meet. Okay, well, you have all these events. Can you have the Raising Cane's 110 hurdles, the Wendy's? Notice everything's food with me, by the way. I don't know why. I don't know what that says about me. I just realized that. And then your shirts and things like that. That's a really good idea to use an existing format that you may already have.
Yeah, and you know what? It takes us a facility, right? If your track's all run down and you're still trying to fix all that, I get that. When I was coaching at Mountain View, our track was old and we had to spend a lot of our time fundraising to get new hurdles to fix things. So if you don't have that, well, the next thing to do, big fundraiser, great idea. Host middle school meets, invitationals. There's no rule in Oregon that says you cannot hold a track meet at the end of the school year, a state championship. So some schools can do middle school state championships on their facilities, and you charge for those. And so we do the district ones. So we do district state champion or the district championships at our school. And we do the same thing. We sell the t-shirts, we do all that kind of stuff. those are fundraisers that you can always make. And the beautiful thing about that is your kids are working. They're learning something. You alluded to your schools, they do one fundraiser all year. Well, our programs, I'm not going to name the company's name because I don't like what they do, but they have you blast out emails to all of your family members asking for donations. There's no work involved in that. And I sincerely believe that if these kids are going to get money for something, they need to provide a service. So, track camp. Why don't you get together with your Parks and Rec? It'll only start off 20 kids the first year. Okay, so 20 kids times $50. Okay, you're going to make that. Our track camp now has 100 to 120 kids that come every year, and they get all that money. And my kids, I don't even have my coaches come. I introduce everybody, parents show up, drop their kids off, sprinters here with these guys, and we break them up, and they get coached for 4 days. And at the very end, we have a little mini meet and then popsicles. And those kids are so excited, they come back the next year and your program just made $3,000.
Wow, I love that. I agree with that about not just, asking for money just for donations in some form or fashion, because I'm a big believer in value. So it's like, well, if you're going to ask me for something I value, my money, I work hard for it. Well,
Right?
I need to get something. I mean, it's how the world works, right? You go to a store, you give money and you get something back, a loaf of bread and whatever.
Absolutely.
Value, absolutely. I love that. That's really cool. Did you start that from the get-go, or did you have to learn as you went through some of it?
I've learned from the get-go, I guess is what it is.
That's
We did the
good.
track camp. I remember we had Pepsi sponsor it because one of my 2005 graduates, that original group, her dad worked for Pepsi. And so they gave us some money. We'd put Pepsi banners up around the place, and we used to do it that way. And we charged 40, $50 a kid. And then I kind of got tired of doing all the paperwork. So we partnered up with Parks and Rec. They put it in their program, and we're making as much, if not more money now with less work because Ben Parks and Rec is doing all of the work. We just show up. And so there's, over time, it all develops, it all takes on its own, I don't know, it becomes its own animal. So we have 16 team captains in our program, and those captains are all in charge of fundraising. And so if we do a state championship basketball tournament, each one of those captains is required to be there the entire time and help organize everything. And that takes a lot of commitment from your kids. So again, it comes back to culture. And I think the culture that you have in your program goes everywhere from how they warm up to how they greet officials, introducing themselves, thanking the officials when they leave, to how they do fundraising and how they talk to parents and other coaches and other athletes and cheer on the other athletes and become gentlewomen of their sport. And I think I was asked a few years ago to write up my philosophy on things. And I said, the philosophy of Summit Track and Field is that you win from the inside out. So our own personal behaviors dictate our outward performance. And so if we can build a culture of integrity, positivity, trust, respect, then all of that will blossom, and we'll be winning without making that our primary focus.
I have a saying I've been saying here for the past, well, really since middle of March, to be real frank, when everything fell apart, right? That, I'm a true believer in leadership, and I think we need leadership now more than ever. I think it's heightened the ability that we need for leaders. You mentioned that you have 16 track captains. How do you go about choosing captains on a year-to-year basis? What are your requirements? I hear captains a lot, but I'm not real sure how each person maybe selects these leaders.
So in the past, when I first developed the program, you basically let the kids vote because that's all I'd ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And what it ends up being a popularity contest. The best athletes, the ones that are getting the scholarships, so that get their names in the paper, they become your captains. And what I found out over time is that wasn't necessarily the best way to go. Yes, a lot of those kids are elite level kids because they're training harder than everybody else, and they do have some leadership powers. But what I started doing is I started taking a look at the kids that were maybe the silent leaders or the shadow leaders, I guess you'd call them, where their actions were powerful, but they weren't vocal. And so what I started looking for were characteristics within the person instead of performance characteristics. So I have some kids, one just graduated this year, and he was called the team captain by all the other captains. And it's because he was such a good leader and he was so organized. But he only made varsity this last year in the hurdle. He was never varsity, never went on a big traveling trip, never did all those things. Yet he was highly respected by all of his teammates because of his leadership abilities. And I'll guarantee being a captain meant more to that kid than getting a scholarship for some of the other kids. And so I think just looking at the potential of leaders, not necessarily what they've already done, but their potential to be leaders, is as important as recognizing, which ones have already had that. And this year in particular, I had to put captains in place. We didn't have a season. So I'm taking a look at sophomores who were juniors this year who didn't get a season. Now they're going to be seniors. So they went from sophomores to being a captain senior year.
Right, yeah.
And I had to take a look at those kids and pull them aside and say, hey, I'm thinking about you as a captain because I believe in your abilities to lead by example and be on time, do all those other things. And you know what? I think if you put that on a kid and you look them in the eye and say, hey, I'm expecting you to be a leader next year, I think 90% of the time, those kids will step up and they'll perform for you.
So are you and the maybe your coaching staff always picking, and is it always seniors?
We try and go with seniors for the most part because those are your more mature kids. But every year out of those 16, I probably got 4 or 5 that are juniors or one. I had one who, after her freshman year, I knew she'd be a captain. So I put her on as a captain her sophomore year. That was a rough time for her because the older kids don't respect a sophomore captain. And so I learned something from that. And she's still to this day, in fact, she'll listen to this interview and she'll say, thank you so much. Without even saying her name, she knows who she is. She to this day will say, being a captain on this team has given her more confidence than anything else she's done in her life. And even with that sophomore year, now her junior and senior year, she was fine. It was that sophomore year was so different.
I can see that in the dynamics of high school. No matter how great of a natural leader someone is, there's that it's the first real hierarchy humans have, 14 to 18-year-olds have. I don't want to call them kids at that point. It's the first hierarchy they have. And I hate to say it's the first power that some of them have, but we know what power does and doesn't do sometimes. That's interesting. Throughout the time, you've had 18 seasons, I think, at Bend. So 36 opportunities for outdoor track for state championships. You've almost half of those have ended with a state championship. Bravo, that's amazing. I did do, again, I went to, from Alabama. Hopefully I did my math there, right? We got close to 50%. Has there been a standout event group for you? And what I mean by that, like, are you always strong in the sprints? Are you always strong in the high jump, or has it been year to year fluctuated?
So people that know Summit High School around the country, they will more than likely look at our distance squad. Okay. So since Summit has opened, and I think it's the clientele that we have at the school, we live on the west side. The parents do have some money. Those kids get some training. We've always been good in the distances. So I think the majority of people, and the girls winning the national championship a couple of years ago, that kind of recognition is very, very good. When I look at the easy way to do it, who's who in track and field, Billy Snow and some other people came up with this book years ago, and I get it every year. And it gives you a breakdown of how your team scored at the state meet. And the distances are clearly one of our strong points, but over the years, the strongest group we've ever had is girls triple jump. They've scored at last count. They do it by point. I think they scored 132 points in the triple jump, and second place out of all the Oregon schools was like 50. And so, we went 1, 2, 3 in the triple jump when my daughter was a freshman. And some people say there are codes in certain events. For girls triple jump for high school, I feel pretty confident that we've come up with a teaching scenario that allows them to develop very quickly. And so, you know, I was talking about Katie Finnegan earlier when we were over at Mountain View. You know, a 36-foot triple jump was a big triple jump. Now we have sophomores doing that over here, and we've had multiple girls over 37 this year. My daughter would have been our first over 38. She went 37, 11 and a half last year. And I actually think she would have hit 40 because she had a senior season this year. So I'd say that or she would have had a senior season. She did an indoor season, which she'd never done before. But she'll get a chance. She's going to Oregon State next year. Sprints have predominantly been pretty strong at Summit, but the distances, I think nationally people would look at that. And we've been fortunate. A couple of years ago, there's an article came out that at the state meet, there was only one event we didn't score in during 1 year. And I think that was the pole vault. And we've shored that up now. But again, high school track and field, 1 year you're going to be setting a state record in the sprints, and 2 years later, you can't score a point. And so it's the nature of the beast. But if you can kind of get coaches in place that can identify talent, because that's the thing, is you can look at a kid walking through the hallways, and I'm to the point now where I'll walk through the hallways and I'll see somebody, I'll say, hey, what's your name? And they'll say, John. Why? John, you're a sprinter. What? You're a sprinter. I see the way you walk on the balls of your feet. You know, I've seen you play basketball. And then fortunately they're smart enough kids. They look at you and they think, okay, this guy took a minute out of his day to come find me. I'm going to go talk to him, and I'm going to try and figure things out.
What do you teach?
I teach sports psychology, which helps. And
hold on, wait a minute. Summit High School has a teacher who teaches sports psychology?
Yes.
I haven't been in high school in a while, but that has to be unique.
Bend High has a sports psychology class. Mountain View has a sports psychology class. That started a few years ago, and I started it because I love the mindset of athletes, and being an athlete myself, I knew that you have to think a certain way to be successful. My daughter's peeking over at me.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I heard you're following in Dad's footsteps. You're going to go to Oregon State. That's a really good school, regardless whether he went to school there or not. That's a good choice.
That's Asha.
Asha, I love it, love it.
Asha. So she's excited, and I'm excited for her. I'm very proud of her.
Well, but before we get to your Oregon State days, I looked up you talked about your coaching staff. You seem to have a fairly large coaching staff, at least what I looked at. I love, we just love lifting up coaches. Maybe talk to us a little bit about your coaching staff and how long they've been with you and their strengths.
Sure. Well, the coaching staff has stayed pretty stable over the years. I have our head throws coach is Chris Shunk. He was an athlete of mine at Mountain View. And when they start new schools, they don't give you much money for a coaching staff. In fact, coaches in Bend, they get 7 stipends. And when I started at Summit, they only gave me 4. And they said, you're not going to have a very big team anyways. Well, the first year we had 160 kids out for track, and that was without a senior class. But I'm pounding the halls, right? Because
yeah, you are.
We've set a goal of winning a state championship. That doesn't happen without numbers.
That's right.
So I'm out, and I'm getting any kid I can get out there. And you have kids that can't make the pit in the long jump, but they're a starting point. So I didn't have any money, so I asked Chris, who was only 18 years old at the time, to come over and coach throws with me. And he said yes. Unfortunately, I coached Damian Olson, who was a 7'3.5" high jumper over at Bend High. And I talked him into coming over, and we had a distance coach that was over at Mountain View, and they came over. So we started off with a pretty secure coaching crew. But over the years, when I found that philosophically, and this is, there are coaches in this country that think I'm a little crazy for this, I decided that our distance squad needed to be a speed-based program.
Okay.
And we had a coach back in the day who would do what most coaches had done, just go out and do a lot of base. And then the last 2 weeks of the season, start to run some 200s and work on foot speed. And I always thought that was backwards. Foot speed takes years to develop. And so I then looked for coaches that were speed-based coaches that understood the interval training is probably more important than the base. And if you get foot speed, then body posture, strike mechanics, all those other things are in place. And honestly, as a high school track coach, 3,000 meters, that's not distance. Anything you
Right.
can do under 10 minutes, I don't think you need to be running 70 miles a week to run a fast 3K. So we put the McClatchys in charge on that, and they're strong, strong coaches. And if you take a look at all their training methodologies, some people are not on board with it. But I remember the very first year we had them as coaches, we went 1, 2, 3 in the 1500, and I thought, okay, that speaks for itself. And those
It's
kids were
results,
fast.
baby.
They were fast. And so we had a couple coaches that aren't there anymore, but phenomenal. Mac McCormick, he was in charge of our sprint crew when our boys ran a 41.56 in the 4x1, and that was that group from 2005. And Lisa Zimmerman, who was a jumper and hurdler at Oregon, she was our jumps and hurdles coach. Phenomenal coaches. And now, the hard thing now, Mike, and I think every coach in this country, a high school coach will tell you this, the hardest part now is you don't get coaches that are also teachers in your building. We only have one coach on our coaching staff that is also a teacher in the building.
Really?
All the others are from outside. They're community members, but that makes it difficult when you're recruiting, because a good track program in high school will have over 100 kids. You've got to get, and I'm talking for a mid to large high school, you got to get the numbers out to be successful. Well, that means somebody's walking the halls, because you're going to have a state champion that's literally in a PE class who's never done track before, and you've got to get eyes on him. And so I think that when you start talking about coaches, the hardest thing any of us have to do right now is find good coaches, because they're not the teachers in your building anymore. We're not getting those teachers.
Yeah, that aspect there, that's what I consider the true lifeblood and grassroots part of track and field. You talk to college coaches, and as a former college coach myself, we'll say recruiting is the lifeblood, right? You have to be able to go out and get the best kids from Summit and the best kids from California and Florida and Texas and what have you, and then still coach them, of course. That element is always going to be there. However, take it another step further. If a coach like you is not walking around looking for that kid who's just in PE or who's just playing JV basketball or whatever, and they go on with their life and they never do track, that's the kind of thing we watch a kid and go, man, if that kid would have ever done track, what could have the world record be? What could the school records be, et cetera? So for you and your staff and all high school coaches around the country to be able to go through and pick those kids who haven't found their sport or haven't found that they don't even think they're athletes, and they come out and get coached and eventually become state champs or just state qualifiers, and then move on to college and get more coaching and become really successful at this sport. That's the real lifeblood at the bottom rung, which is the biggest one. That's the lifeblood right there.
Yeah, I agree to it. And, we have, I was talking about the strength of the triple jumpers at Summit. A few years ago, we had a girl named Brooke, and I tried to get her out for track her freshman year just because I coached her at the elementary school. Before I was at Mountain View, I was an elementary school teacher. And this young girl came into Summit, and I couldn't get her out for track her freshman year. She just said, Turnbull, I'm not fast, I can't jump. And I got her out, and we turned her into a triple jumper. You know what? If I use her as an example when I'm doing coaches clinics, because if you take a look at her marks, she didn't even run a 14-second 100. She couldn't throw the shot put. She couldn't long jump. She was only about 13.8 long jumper, but I taught her the basics of the triple jump, and she was strong. And then we did some mental activities where I did tear down days, where I would tear them down and make them do workouts that they would absolutely collapse on and then push them through it. And she was one of those kids that was screaming at me one day, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I basically looked at her and I said, Brooke, we're not going anywhere till you finish this workout. And it was a brutal lunging workout. And she finished it. Her senior year, she won a state championship in the triple jump. And she was not a spectacular athlete. But she put it all together at that one moment in time. And I remember the night before that meet, she was in tears saying, "What am I doing here, Turnbull?" And she was ranked last. And I looked at her and said, "Brooke, you deserve to be here." She goes,
Wow.
"Turnbull, but I'm going to embarrass myself." And I won't say the young lady's name that was favored to win, but I looked at Brooke and I said, "Brooke, you're in a perfect position here." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Nobody knows you. You have no expectations on you. You know who should worry? This girl who has won it 3 times in a row. Everybody's looking at her. You go out there and just open up and just play free." And I love that term, play free. And she got out there and she qualified for finals on her first jump. So on her second jump, she comes over and I'm having to yell across the track at her. I said, "Brooke, come over here." She comes over. I said, "Now go win it." And she goes, "What?" I said, "Win it." And she goes, "Turnbull." And I said, "You remember the day on the hill doing lunges, how mad you were at me? Stir your emotions, get out there and win it." Her next jump was 37.3. I have a picture of her. You can see her handprints on her thighs from slapping her thighs and getting into it. And all the other girls are laughing at her and she wins it. And to this day, that's one of those stories that I just look back and go, you just don't know what a kid can do until you inspire them. And once you inspire them, just get out of the way.
That is that sports psychology right there, man. Holy cow.
But that's what makes our sport so exciting.
Absolutely.
You can take
Absolutely.
an individual and just find their strength. Her strength was she was a fighter. She wasn't the greatest athlete, but she was a fighter and she didn't even know she was a fighter. And sometimes you have to be able to convince kids, because they're 15, 16 years old, you have to convince them what their talents are, because they haven't got any background to have
Mm.
confidence in that. And we do. And so I guess your greatest coaches have the ability to look at a kid and see what their potential is and raise the bar for them, but then help them get over it.
Yeah, I think that's the key there is that raising the bar. The more you expect, the higher they'll come. They may never hit the final bar, and much like the high jump and pole vault, we never do, right? We never make the final bar.
Nope.
But if you keep raising that bar, the kids will keep getting better in all aspects. We're talking track and field specifically here, but academics, emotionally, socially, etc. Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned the state meet, which is held at the University of Oregon. What besides that being special and unique for Oregon only, everybody else, the Mecca is to travel to Eugene to go to the University of Oregon. You guys get to go there every year. What other unique aspects are there? You mentioned, you actually said the 3,000 meters, unique aspects of Oregon high school track. You mentioned the 3,000. I'm only familiar with the 3,200 throughout
I
states. What else do you guys do unique there?
1,500,
And the 15, yeah.
3,000, 1,500. We still have the javelin, which is a beautiful thing, the pole vault.
Yeah.
I'd love to see us get the hammer. I think a high school kid that can learn the hammer, there's some scholarship opportunities there because all the colleges do it. But we don't have, I think Oregon's unique in the fact that most of the events that are seen as dangerous, we still do. We're in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
We're country kids, so they're not afraid to put a javelin in their hands and all that kind of stuff. We just have to go over a lot of safety protocols. But I think those are the big differences. Just
You don't have any of the unique relays or anything. You just have the standard 4x1, 4x4, 4x8.
no, we don't even do a 4x8 in Oregon, and I'd like to see that. And I love the medleys, the distance and the sprint medleys, which is why I love going to the Oregon relays, because we get a chance to do that and see what your kids can do. And this year we would have taken our girls to the outdoor national championships, because we would have had a girls distance medley that would have, I think, top 3 in the country. It would have been so fun, and we'd already planned on going. They all said they were going to, and then COVID.
Yeah, then the what happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the kids, it's a special thing for people that come from the outside and travel to Hayward, the Hayward magic. Do the kids, because you're there every year, does it get lost on them, the specialness of Hayward Field, or is it still special every time they show up?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty darn special the next time we get there, because our kids got used to being at Hayward. In fact, they called it home. It sounds crazy, but they were excited about going back this year, because last year we were at Mount Hood Community College, And I remember specifically,
That's right.
Fiona and Izzy Max both said, we're going back to Hayward. We're going to go back home and get our state championship back. And that's what they all thought, is we're going to go back to Hayward. We're going to be there. We're going to get back, not to start another run, but get back on track to where, shoot, the girls had not lost a state championship at Hayward in 12 years. So they wanted to go back there and give that another shot. So I don't think it had worn off on them. I think they became very comfortable in that environment, which again, that's what the goal was. I want to get to a point where we put them in such incredibly challenging track meets and workouts that the state meet was special, but it was just another track meet. And not to take anything away from it, but I don't want them getting in the blocks next to somebody thinking, oh no. I want them getting into the blocks thinking, here I go. So I don't think they've lost how important and special that place was. I know a lot of them are going to miss the historic Hayward because you can't replace that, but it is pretty special looking right now.
But you can always create your own history, and that's, I think, the openness, the newness, the specialness. It's the #1 track facility in the world. I'll say, as someone who's been intimately involved in it from the equipment side,
Sure.
it is special, and it will be special. And I think even more so because we had something taken away from us, right? 2020 is gone. We can't replace that. So there's a lot of pent up for the athletes. I think there's a lot of pent up. I want to get out there and do what I do my craft. And for coaches, I know, talking to coaches throughout the country, I think this has been a really good thing. It sounds weird to say that, but I think coaches have they've been able to finally step back, because we've just been season after season after season, and they've had something that is special to them taken away. And, again, you come to those crossroads, you can either cry in your tears and lick your wounds, or you can say, okay, well then I'll go become an even better coach. I've got more time on my hands. I'll become a better coach. And when we do get a chance to go out in 2021, my kids will be even better prepared to be the greatest triple jumpers, javelin throwers, pole vaulters. I'm excited for 21 for so many reasons, one of them being new Hayward Field, but also just to see what product the coaches put out there, because boy, you guys have had a lot of time to get even better at the craft you're already good at. It's going to be pretty special, I think, when we get to let the engines go and let them run.
I agree, and the athletes feel that too. I was talking to our football coach the other day. Summit struggles a little bit with numbers in football. Usually you've got, sorry about that.
No worries.
It's my mom, I'll call her back.
Mom.
Yeah, of course she's going to call during an interview. But, sometimes they struggle getting numbers out. They usually have 60 or 70 kids out. Well, they're over 100 right now because kids are just wanting to get out there. And so, and cross country right now, normally they get 60 or 70 kids in the summer. They've had over 100. And so our numbers are going to be bigger than they've ever been, because I think the kids, as you said, the coaches realize now what they've missed. I think this overall, once we put it behind us and move forward,
Right.
I think kids are learning how special school is, how special athletics are, how special their friends are. And I think we're going to go back, and I think we need to take advantage of this opportunity and really take a look at how important relationships are. Because really that's what they're missing.
Right.
You can sit on a computer like this and get content, but you can't get the face-to-face
Not the same
interaction, the high fives, the hugs, all those things that build community. You can't get that. And so I think you're right. I think we're going to see some very special things. And I think this can be a launching point to what we're going to be, and what a great opportunity we're going to have in 2021.
Absolutely. That's great points about not just the athleticism and the time and distance on the tape measure, but the actual people and who we connect with. And, for sure, as we're here on the Connections podcast, that's important for us, is that those connections from athlete to coach and from coaches to coaches, man, that's the real special part about it at the end of the day. Absolutely. So we've been talking about Hayward Field, and certainly, we have a small affinity for Hayward Field here at Gill, but you're a Beaver. You're not a Duck. Let's get in our Wayback Machine here. We've been talking about the amazing time you've had at Summit High School. It sounds like you grew up in this area and then you went to Oregon State. Tell us about that. How did you get to Oregon State?
So that's an interesting story. I moved to Bend from Pendleton, Oregon in 1976. And I was just a long-haired kid from a cowboy community, and I didn't fit in Bend. And I had one friend, and I went to middle school, and they were playing a tag game, and I wanted, to be part of things, and nobody would ever get the ball to me or anything like that. And one day I got it, and I took off running, and nobody could catch me. And the next day, all of a sudden, everybody wanted me on their team. Well,
Wow.
that kind of led me down the athletic side of things, because I realized, okay, I have a talent for that. And then I joined the football team and went to Mountain View. I started off as a tight end because I was a 5'10" freshman. So he's tall, right? Throwing the ball. He really can't catch. Coach puts me in at running back during a football game and tells me to score a touchdown. We are on our own 40. He throws me in. We're running I formation, throws me in at tailback. And he says, Dave, and this is Jack Lutz, who's since passed away. He says, I'm going to put you in at tailback. I was scared to death. He says, you run a touchdown or I'm going to make you run in front of the entire crowd after the game. I didn't know him very well, so I thought he was completely serious. Our quarterback pitched me the ball, and I went 60 yards for a touchdown.
No.
And after the game, he said, you're a running back. 4 years later, I'm averaging a little over 10 yards a carry on our football team. I'm a defensive back, and I had a number of interceptions that year and ended up being an academic All-American for football, and I signed a full ride scholarship to Oregon State.
Oh, I had no idea. Wait a minute. So are you not doing track in high school?
I was. I did
Okay.
track. I had a good run at things, but I signed a scholarship during football because our family wasn't well off. So I was really fearful, even though I set a goal of jumping 7 foot in high school. That was my goal.
Okay.
I'd only gone 6'10" up to my junior year. And even though I thought I could jump 7 foot, I didn't know that that would be good enough for a full ride scholarship. So I signed with Oregon State.
Yeah.
Well, then track season comes around. I jump 7 foot and a quarter, break the state record. All these offers are in. I've already signed with Oregon State. And I'm okay with that because I like football. I go to Oregon State. I get a concussion immediately.
Oh.
I recover from that. I get another one. It's not a sport for me. I'm 5'10", 155 pounds playing Division I football. So I go in and talk to the coach, and I'm playing cornerback. And I feel like if I have a chance to play a running back position or receiver position, I can catch now. And they wouldn't let me, they didn't give me that opportunity. So I looked at, it was a coach there, and I looked at him, I said, listen, I need to follow the words of what my mother always told me. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it. I said, I don't enjoy playing defense, so I'm going to give you back your scholarship. And he looked at me, he said, you're kidding me. And I said, Coach, if you give me a shot at offense, I'll stick around. He said, nope, you're an All-American defensive back, and that's where we need you. Wow. So I walked across the hall, talked to Chuck McNeil, told him I needed a full ride to stay there. He said he didn't think he could make that happen, and I knew that I'd have to sit, but UCLA had contacted me. And so I said, UCLA does, and then he stopped me. He said, hold on. He made some phone calls and said, if you can get through your first semester, we can pick you up the rest of the way. And so I joined SAEs. I lived there for free. And then I continued my track career there, and did better in the long jump and triple jump. Didn't really improve in the high jump. My own fault. Didn't take track as seriously as I should have. As a coach now, I know how I would have done things differently. But I had a great time, developed some great friendships, and really learned so much about what not to do, which is as important as knowing what to do. So as a coach, it kind of triggered my appetite for coaching differently. Just kind of, okay, what do you need to do with kids? I had an opportunity when I was at Oregon State. Our coach, Chuck McNeil, had to go overseas to coach an Olympic team. And I was basically left in charge of the high jumpers. And we had a girl named Kim Fenton back in those days. And she was a good high jumper, like 5'7". And one day I had a sports psychology moment with her. She was having a rough day. And so I tricked her. I did some things. I moved the bar up without her looking. I was doing all these different things. She PR'd in practice by 4 inches just by me manipulating her mindset.
Holy cow.
And then the next weekend, she jumped 6 feet in the high jump. And she ended up signing with LSU after Oregon State cut the program. But it was those types of things that made me understand that you can manipulate the mind to have the body do things it probably wouldn't have done. And I knew that as a 7-foot high jumper. There's a barrier there. And I wasn't a great high jumper. I was a great converter. And I almost snapped my tibia and fibia in college because I would come in with full speed and I'd put the foot down and go straight up.
Is that what you mean by converter, horizontal to the vertical?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay, all right, yeah.
Pretty dangerous. I don't coach kids like that, but
yeah.
I wanted to be a 7-foot high jumper so much, and I could barely dunk a basketball in high school, that I just learned that if I would come in at full speed and I had this really weird J, it'd come in at more looked like a fish hook. I'd come in and then swing wide and put my foot down. And they actually, Gillespie and some other guys filmed me and they said, how is this guy not breaking his leg? And then in college, I felt it bend and I then widened my approach. But, you know, Oregon State was a great opportunity for me to learn. And when I took my daughter back there, it reminded me of what a great community it is. And it's funny, she'd always been more of Arizona State, Arizona, U of O, not Oregon State. That's my son. He loves the Beavers. He wants to play football for them, but he's probably not quite ready for that. So he's down at Southern Oregon playing football. And I didn't, you know, my daughter and I went on an unofficial visit, fortunately, before all this isolation started. And she met some of the girls over there and she met the coaches and the jumps coach, Pete, and we're leaving and she looks at me and she goes, Dad, I could see myself going to school here. I was completely shocked. And I'm happy that I was there. So I knew the community. I thought it would work well for her. And now she's doing better than she's ever done at anything. She's taken online classes this summer. She's staying ahead of everything. She's excited to be there. And hopefully she continues to enjoy track and develop as an athlete. And
as a good friend of Pete, she's picking a great coach. I love him to death, man. I'm biased because I love the guy to death as a friend. So
I'm excited, and she tends to really like him. And she walked away going, I like Pete, you know. And I'm like, well, there you go. Because if you can get a coach that you appreciate, trust, and build that relationship, that's where your performance comes in.
So when you were doing back at Oregon State and you're transitioning from football to track and field, where was your mindset as far as a career? Were you thinking of becoming a coach? Were you just thinking about becoming a teacher? Where were you at in that side of life?
Well, I want to be completely honest with you. When I first transitioned just to being a track athlete, I was thinking about the track girls, man. Track girls are cute. That's all I was thinking about. I got to be honest, 18, 19-year-old kid, I had no aspiration of being a coach. I had this weird thought that maybe somewhere there I'd get a 7.5 or 7.6 high jump and qualify for the trials and do some things like that. And then, you know, if I don't know what your recollection is, but if you remember the NFL strike that happened in the 80s, the CFL started up and they were recruiting all around. And I was talked to, they wanted me to maybe try out for the CFL, be a scrub or whatever they called them. Because I was still high jumping around 7 foot. My 40 time had actually dropped to about a 4.35. And so I thought about maybe going into football, and I had an offer to return punch for Cleveland. And it was a $200,000 a year thing. And all I could think about is the number of concussions I had in the Pac-10. Okay, how is that gonna, there's no way. I'm a little guy playing a game that is all about impact. And so I had to make a decision, and I just stuck with things at Oregon State. They cut the program my senior year, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I wonder where you fit into that. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
My senior year, they cut the program. We organized a relay to the state capitol, trying to bring attention to it. And that was all, well, it was great. We got to the capitol. We met with somebody up there, and they said, you know, ultimately it's not our decision. That's your president's decision, and they're going to cut the program. They're going to cut the program. Nothing we can do about it. So they cut it, and I didn't have a degree because I was not a very good student. My story is really long, so I won't bore you with all that.
No, this is great. I'm
I
shocked by this, by the way, though.
Well, most people are when they look at what we're doing now. I only had a
Right.
2.2 GPA. I didn't ever go to class. I was the kid that frustrates me now. I was the kid that didn't take things seriously, you know. I
There's
had some
a
bad
word
days.
for that, right? Karma or
I
something.
know. Yeah. So I came back to Bend and I got a job with my old boss. I was working at Ken's Ice Company, and I was getting ready to manage the company, and I'd been there for a long time. And then I met this beautiful woman, and I decided I didn't want to work 12-hour days anymore. I wanted to spend time with her. So I left that job, which was honestly the hardest decision I've ever made in my life because I loved my employers. And they offered to give me half of the business, which was about $1 million.
Wow.
And I decided that's not a route I wanted to take, which is a big decision when you're 22 years old. And I just left and I went over and started selling cars. I sold cars for a year. That didn't really work out. I got a job delivering beer, and I was a beer salesman. And then
This
one
is the
day
most unorthodox path
I
to
know,
a multi-time state champion coach. What in the world, man?
well, here's how it worked is I became a coach because I was walking through Safeway one day and I ran into my old high school coach. And here I was, I had some long hair. And he stopped me. I'm pushing my cart through Safeway, and he goes, "When are you going to go back to Oregon State and become a teacher?" And I looked at him, I said, "Why do you keep saying that?"
Wow.
And he said, "Because I've seen you." And I was doing some volunteer coaching at the time. He said, "I've seen you coach. Coaching is teaching." I said, "Bill, track, I know track. It's easy." He goes, "It's just a different environment. You need to go back." And I went home, I talked to my wife about it, and we decided that's what I was going to do. I gave a 6-month leave. I said, at the beer company, I said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go. And Brad Wales, one of the owners there, he stopped me and he said, "What are you doing? You're one of our up and comers. We're excited about you." And I said, "Brad, I'm going to go back to school and become a teacher." And he stopped, he put his hand out, he shook my hand. He said, "That's the smartest decision you've ever made."
Oh, good for him. Good.
So I went back, got my degree, and came back and started coaching football at Redmond, track at Mountain View, halftime teaching, and halftime delivering beer because I needed to supplement my income. And then finally I got a full-time job at Mountain View and then moved over to Summit.
You know, earlier you talked about walking through the hallways and talent identification, seeing that kid going, "Hey, you're a sprinter. Hey, you're a javelin thrower." It's interesting to me that your old high school coach, Bill, talent identified you and said, "Hey, when are you going to quit screwing around, David? When are you going to become a teacher?" Isn't that interesting? That part of talent identification with you.
See, that's the value of coaching. And the funny thing is, he told me several times, "You need to go become a teacher." And I didn't know what he was talking about because I'm young and I have no idea. But when I did my first student teaching at, well, I can't remember if it was West or South, but I do remember the teacher, Steve Pensinger. I was doing student teaching, and the very first day I taught a lesson, he pulled me aside and he goes, "Why did you decide to become a teacher?" And I said, "My high school track coach." And he says, "Boy, he was right. You're already a master teacher." I mean, I'll never forget him saying,
Wow.
"You're already a master teacher." Now, I was an older than average student, and I think maturity helps with that.
Sure.
But I'll never forget Steve just look at me, and Steve lives here in Sun River now. But that was such an empowering moment where I was like, "Oh, he sees it too. This must be what I'm supposed to do." And it has been the greatest thing I've ever done in my life.
Bill had to keep saying, "Hey, go, you're a teacher. Hey, you're a teacher. Hey, I bet you can think of a kid that was walking in the hallway that you kept saying, 'Hey, you're a sprinter.' 'Yeah, yeah, yeah, coach.' The next year, 'Hey, you're a sprinter.' 'Yeah, yeah, yeah, coach.' And then finally shut up and listen to Coach Turnbull and became a really a team contributing sprinter."
Well, probably the biggest one, I'm looking at her right now, my daughter. I've been telling
Oh,
her all her life, that she has the perfect body of a triple jumper. And I don't think she completely understood what that was
Sure.
until she really got to high school and started performing. And even, you know, there are people right now that have seen more potential in her than I did, which shocks me. And but it does kind of hit home with me when you talk about Bill seeing that in me. I've never even thought of that the way you just explained it to me, but it's so true that coaches can see things that other people can't. And that's ultimately the value in what we do. And if we just hone in on that skill alone, where we can find a kid and see what they're good at and get them in the right event. With 17 events in high school track and field, it's not too hard for a kid to be running the 3000 who actually might be an 800 runner, but they're running the 3000 because they do cross country, right? So they're just feeding that one thing. But maybe throw them in the long jump one day. And if that girl goes out and long jump 16 feet, I'll guarantee she's more of an 800 runner, you know. But that's the job of a coach, is to find the true talent of the athlete.
Man, you couldn't have said it any better. That's one of the beauties of our sport is when you play other sport. Yeah, I played high school football as well. You get pigeonholed pretty quickly. You're an offensive lineman, you're a running back, you're a DB, etc. But in track and field, you're right. You can think you're a long jumper and not doing so well, and maybe actually you're an 800 meter. Right? There's so many events. That's the beauty of the sport, is that there really is a place for everyone to play and to contribute. That's the next, kind of the cherry on top. You can actually contribute, finding your event. And that's the power of the coaches to find that event.
And I think that's why I like track so much, is you can build this family, because track and field, like you said, there are so many different body types and abilities that even if you're a dysfunctional family, you're a family. And so we'll take it.
I've never said this before. It's going to be recorded. I'm so glad you got those concussions, David. And hear me out. Because that allowed us, the sport of track and field, that started the stages of you coming back to track and field and doing the many, many great things, the many positive impacts that you have made in the sport of track and field, and specifically the athletes that have gone through the program. And I know you've done a lot with mentoring the assistant coaches that have come through your program as well. So it sounds so weird, but I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad it wasn't life-changing permanent damage, because unfortunately that also can happen. But I'm so glad that track brought you back in and that you went full force into it and made such a positive impact. And here's the good news: we'll continue to make a positive impact. We're not done. The story is not finished here. Many, many seasons to go, my friend.
I'm hoping to get about 6 more, and then I'd like to retire when I'm 60. And just, I love what I do. I love farming. There are things I want to do with my wife before I'm too old. And I think a lot of people, they keep doing what they're doing because they're in a comfort zone and that's all they know. I like challenges. So I'd like to see how far we can go in the next 6 years. And honestly, if I'm still having a blast, I'll keep doing it. But I'd like to see how farming can go. I'd like to help my son take over my DJ business and recording studio, and see what my daughter wants to do. She wants to be an FBI agent, so maybe I can help her do that. And, who knows? But I do have a plan for 6 more years to keep doing this.
Well, and I bet at the end of the 6 years, you got to figure out where to put those footprints, that there's got to be something there. And at the end, or at the beginning, actually, of those footprints, we need to see your footprints, man, because, that there's going to be a next head coach of Summit High School, and there's going to be more kids that come through. And legacy is a invaluable thing. If they can learn that legacy and then start living up to it, man, that's many, many, many more state titles to come, and even more so, great experiences for those kids and coaches.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's the thing, is when you start looking back, it is all the victories of kids learning about themselves and what they can do, not necessarily the titles on the wall. Just real quickly, I was asked the other day, the greatest success stories or the greatest athletes we've ever had at Summit. And the Ashton Eatons of the world, the Fiona Max, Izzy Max, all these kids we've had, they weren't in the running. it was kids like, we had a kid named Eric Aldrich who came in, and he was the worst runner on our team his freshman year. His sophomore year, he was not varsity, and he kept working and working and working, and he worked his tail off, and he became a state champion in the 3,000 meters, and he ended up running for Oklahoma, and he is an amazing athlete. Similar to Sarah Taylor, a little high jumper that we had, who came in, and she was about 95 pounds her freshman year, and she was so quiet I could hardly understand her, and she developed, and she was only jumping 4'4" her sophomore year. Said she wanted to be varsity. I quizzed her on some things, and I asked her if she was afraid to bleed. She said no. I said, are you afraid to throw up? No. Are you afraid to cry? No. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And she came out, and I put her through the hardest lunging workout we do of the year. She made it through. She cried. She fell. She collapsed. It took her half an hour longer than anybody else, and she had one teammate that stood and cheered her on. The next year, she jumped 5'5" and placed third at the state track meet, and she's now a school teacher. Those are the greatest success stories we've ever had.
That's awesome.
Because those kids weren't blessed with the speed, weren't blessed with something. They had to take what we're going to teach them and apply it to themselves in a manner that most people can't. A discipline, a dedication, and it dictated the rest of their lives. That's what we're.
I love it. My man, you have got 6 acres to go work at. You talked about farming. You have a lot of work to do. If you are friends with David on Facebook, let me tell you what, there ain't many track pictures, especially lately, but there's a whole lot of rows and rows and rows. It's your own social distancing, like you said the other day.
I'll post another picture today. I'm out there trying to kill some ants. They've killed 6 of my plants, and I'm trying to figure that out. So I'll post a picture today, and maybe post that we talked today. And I appreciate you reaching out to me. It's been fun.
Absolutely, man. You know, I'm kind of like, my son, I have a 9-year-old who's into Pokemon. You got to catch them all. I'm kind of feeling that way with coaches now. It's like, I just got to get every coach, man. I just love every story is unique. There's so much to learn from each one. And we certainly learned from you today, David, man. I can't say thank you enough for joining us today and being just so open and authentic and sharing really a unique story that has a lot of spider webs out there. I mean, the network is large, the impact that you have made in this sport, specifically in the area of Bend, Oregon, but really all the sport in totality.
It makes life really fun and rewarding when you have people that you've coached that contact you and want you at their weddings, and they're sending you pictures of their children and all that kind of stuff. And all of you coaches out there know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you feel bad because you can't go to all of them, but you at least send them a congratulations, and you know that you're part of their life forever. And that really is the value of coaching.
Well, you've given a lot of value. And again, at least I'm gonna hold you to it, 6 more years worth of value. That's several classes, that's several rotations of kids in high school, man. Thank you. Right. Thank you so much, David. I'm so blessed that you allow me to share your story today on the Connections podcast. I look forward to seeing a great 2021 in your rival, University of Oregon, Hayward Field.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Everybody take care.